There's a subreddit for methamphetamine users. The mods of it decided you can't say anything sexist or racist or anything offensive, nothing homophobic. So a group had to create a separate subreddit called Meth Without Communism. Reddit banned them all. I don't advocate using meth.
Or communism. But you were one of the first 3 people that formed Twitter.
Yep.
Elon changed the name to X.
I still call it Twitter. I'm going to dead name it.
Creating your own algorithm. Right now, everyone's just subjected to whatever the algorithm is. And that's, well, probably the most effective high leverage tool for psychological operations.
Instagram is an art gallery. TikTok is like an amusement park. Facebook has become the municipal community center where someone has a family reunion, but a really sad one.
It's cool to be alive right now. I mean,
it's very exciting.
We are in the change of an age, right? From the industrial age into this digital age. How weird is the world going to get in the next 100 years?
It's going to get very weird.
You go by Rabble.
Yeah.
Okay. What, is that a nickname?
It's a nickname.
Where'd you get that?
So I got it because I'd run an activist website and I didn't want to put my name on it. So I made the usernames rabble-rousers@protest.net.
Okay.
And then I'd used it on my blog, late 90s, early 2000s. And when we got together to form the company that became Twitter, of the initial 3 of us, there were 2 Evans.
Okay.
And so the other Evan went by Ev. So we have Ev Williams.
Yeah.
And I went by Rabble because I just I'd had an email address, I hadn't picked it. And then everyone knew me at that. And I thought it was a little bit badass and I sort of kept it. And then when Twitter actually launched, neither of us got at Evan because we weren't used to going by that name.
Rabble. Strong name.
Yeah.
So you said when we got together to form Twitter, so you were one of the first 3 people that formed Twitter.
Yeah. So initially the company was a podcasting company called Audio.
Okay.
That we formed in 2004. We were the first podcasting company.
Yeah.
The first company to build a commercial podcasting platform, first podcasting company to get investment, anything like that. And we were too early. We eventually decided.
Yeah.
But we were working on building that and launched it, got some ideas, started to get some press, and Apple came in and just did so much better job of integrating iTunes with podcasting and the iPod that they crushed us. And then we had this moment where we were like, oh shit, what do we do?
Pivot moment.
We had the pivot moment. It's the most famous pivot. It was the first time that someone did a really famous pivot. And we sat down on the team. Jack was part of the team. He was sort of our most talented engineer. And we said, well, what can we build? And we just started throwing out ideas. And we started doing these weekly hackathons. And that's where Twitter comes from. Jack's like, I want to do a send a status update thing. And we divided up into teams at 9 a.m. and he demoed it at 6 p.m. The first version of Twitter was built in a day.
Wow. So it was a crushing defeat turned into a quick pivot into hackathons and then poof, there's Twitter.
Yeah.
How, talk me through spurring the network effect. That's not enough, right? You just don't build the app. How do you create what has become, now X today, but how do you spur the network effect?
So initially Twitter was just 12 of us. We were the entirety of Twitter and you could tweet and you could see everybody's messages. And we used it to just keep in touch with what our coworkers were doing. And keep in touch with a couple friends and people's spouses. Cause that was the only people we could convince to join. And what happened was people either hated it or loved it. And the people who loved it just kept using it. It had that dopamine thing. It had that addiction thing of oh my God, I can feel like I'm following other people's lives and I can know what's going on with it. And so initially it spread among bloggers, like people who already had a blog, who were very online, and they wanted a shorter form of doing it. And we called it microblogging before we just call it Twitter.
Yeah, that's so cool. And so blogging, and then it just propagated out from there.
Blogging, and then
because you eventually had celebrities tweeting, right? Wasn't that
not
a big?
Then.
No.
We tried to get celebrities.
Yeah.
We had this guy did biz dev, Adam, and we sent him down to Hollywood.
Yeah.
And we said, Adam, find celebrities for Twitter.
Yeah.
And the first celebrity he found was the assistant scriptwriter for My Name is Earl.
Okay.
Not a big celebrity. But he was very funny. Like, he was really good at Twitter.
Yeah.
Because he could get those quips in and things like that. And the turning point comes a year in when Ev decides to rent screens in the halls at South by Southwest and display tweets from other people at South by.
Gotcha.
And all of a sudden, instead of having an ephemeral idea of what your friends are doing, you can have an ephemeral idea of what the vibe or the zeitgeist is of everybody else at South by.
Right.
And that was exciting. And one guy wrote, hey, this bar is just way too crowded. There's like, I can't find a place to sit. I can't talk to anyone. I see that a bar 2 blocks away is empty. I'm going to go over there. And he tweets it. By the time he walks gets out of the bar and walks the 2 blocks over, so many other people have seen the tweet that the new bar becomes full. And you end up with this flocking effect.
Yeah.
And that was the moment where we're like, oh, Twitter's going to be a thing.
Yeah. Wow. And so was it always, because initially you said business communication, basically, internally, then it becomes people just spewing their stream of consciousness, something like that, but you had to display it. When does it evolve into this mainstream social media utility?
So it takes a few years.
Yeah.
It was like, Twitter felt like it came out of nowhere, but we founded the company in 2004. We actually pivoted in 2006. We didn't get anybody thinking we were a good idea until 2007, 2008. There's a TechCrunch article which says, was this the stupidest move in the history of Silicon Valley? That pivot. And by 2009, 2010, all of a sudden it starts to pick up. Like, people start coming. And what happened was Twitter did a really good job at looking at what the users were doing. So the hashtag that Chris Messina started doing, the company didn't do that. The users did that. The at reply, the company didn't do that. Users started doing the at reply. Users started writing RT and copying and pasting people's tweets.
Wow.
Users started using other services to make short links to drop in there. Users started figuring out how to add images. Some other company called Surmise built a search engine to give trending topics. And so what Twitter, the company, did was just listen to the users, watch how they were doing it, and support it.
Yeah. Wow.
And so Twitter was co-created between the people at the company and the users of it. And that's why it feels like you joined Twitter.
Wow. That's amazing. That's so, as a technology startup, the most important thing you can do is pay attention to what your customers are doing and, and how they're adapting your product.
Yeah. And all of Twitter's innovation comes from listening to the users.
Wow. That is a beautiful market solution, if I've ever heard of one. And so what was it like for you working in the early days versus becoming what it is today? Like, when did you get off the ride? By the way, like, how was that experience?
So I left relatively early.
Yeah.
But Twitter was a very open organization.
Yeah.
We left the front door open in South Park and people would just wander in. People would contribute code and design and documentation who weren't employees. And so it was a very open, collaborative space. And that's why it worked. So I left actually 6 months after we created Twitter because I went over to work with Stuart Butterfield and Katarina Fake over at Yahoo on Flickr.
Yeah.
Because I thought Flickr was the big Web 2.0 success. And it was way bigger than Twitter at the time.
It was big, really big for a while.
Yeah.
I remember, yeah.
So I went and jumped ship to go work on Flickr when it was the leading platform. And that was a mistake, obviously, because Yahoo torpedoed Flickr and messed it up. And Twitter grew and thrived.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, what are your big takeaways from that experience? I mean, it's like, this kind of stuff they make movies about, right?
Yeah, there's documentaries, there's books. They keep threatening to do a movie about it. It's very weird. I was just hanging out with Jack the last couple days.
That's right. You just arrived from Costa Rica.
And we were reminiscing about what it was like and how crazy it was and how we didn't set out to change the world. We set out to build something that we wanted. We set out to build something that was fun to use, that was interesting. And then all of a sudden, the entire world, it felt like, joined. And it eventually became really unmanageable. And, that's why we're working on protocol solutions. We're working on other solutions now because the idea of one person being in control of this platform, that's not a good idea. Right.
You mentioned Jack, obviously Jack Dorsey, founder, former CEO. How has he evolved over the years? Like, I mean, you saw him from the beginning. You said he's your most talented programmer, I think you said at the beginning, and obviously he went on to be the CEO. Like, how has Jack grown through all of this?
He has changed a lot.
Yeah.
He's also exactly the same person. People talk about Jack Dorsey and compare him to Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
I thought he kind of acted like Steve Jobs when no one knew who he was.
Yeah.
And he was just a programmer on the team, hadn't managed anyone. He had that aesthetic. He had that drive. He had that, sort of quality.
Yeah.
But he didn't know how to manage people. He had to learn that.
Sure.
And the reason he became CEO was because he was just the most passionate person on the team about this sort of Twitter prototype. And someone joked before we got the name Twitter, someone joked that we should just call it Friend Stalker.
Friend Stalker. Much less marketable.
No, it was a terrible name. And one of the other guys, Noah, on the team, actually got a giant dictionary and he looked through it from A to T till he found the word Twitter.
Really?
Yes, because it's in the dictionary. It's a real word.
Wow. He read words A through...
He spent so much time at the back of the office with this giant Oxford English dictionary.
And what does the word actually mean?
It's the short little bits of communication of birds.
Oh, right.
But there are newspaper articles, like clippings you can see, that have tweet-like things that actually call the column Twitter. And it's like people write in little short messages and it gets sent out to other people. And that was in the 1920s.
Yes. Wow. I thought it was such an excellent name.
It's an amazing name.
Yeah.
I don't understand why Elon changed it because, it's so good. It's such a good brand.
Yeah. Yeah. Such a good brand. Elon purchased Twitter now. Has it been 2 years? How long?
Yeah, 2 years ago.
2 years. Yeah. Changed the name to X. Yeah. I don't know. I still call it Twitter most of the time. I still call
it Twitter.
Yeah.
I'm going to dead name it.
Until he has to go back, right?
Yep.
What's your views on that? Like, how is he doing a good job? It seems like he's definitely, he cut a lot of staff, functionality has changed, pricing has changed. There's been a lot of changes. What are your views on Elon thus far?
There's been a lot of changes, and that part's good. Twitter needed to change more. It needed to try more things. And it was stuck as a publicly traded company with the markets just preventing it from doing innovation. Now, what Elon's done with that innovation, I don't like. He promised to make it open source more stuff. He promised to let users control the algorithms. He talked to us about embracing open protocols, which I've always held dear.
Sure.
And then he ended up using it as a partisan political tool. And even though a lot of the early Twitter employees and later were on the left, there was always an ethos that Twitter should do its best to be neutral.
Town square.
It's a town square.
Yeah.
It can't take sides.
Yeah.
And I feel like Elon is using it to take sides.
Well, that's a good point. And this is, also pointing toward the importance of neutral, incorruptible protocols, right?
Absolutely.
You need things like language that are difficult to corrupt and that we can use to interact and cooperate. Which brings us to Nostr. What is Nostr, right? So you've been through this whole passage.
Nostr is a social media, social protocol.
Okay.
And what Nostr lets us do is build everything that was a Web 2.0 app.
And we should say it's not a company. Like,
it's not a company.
Got to reinforce that point. It's not a company. This is an internet protocol?
It's an internet protocol.
Okay.
And it's a community of developers and users and companies. There's a bunch of companies together, but there's no company at the center. And what Nostr is trying to do is revive the dream of Web 2.0, where users were in control, where we could be creative, we could build stuff. Because in the early days of Twitter, there was this open API. So you didn't use the app from Twitter, the company. You used Twitterific or TweetDroid or all these others. There were thousands of apps that you could use and you could build on top of Twitter. And it was this open ecosystem. What happened in 2012, after Jack gets pushed out, is the company decides that their only business model is advertising, and they shut down that open ecosystem. They controlled the APIs, they shut it down, they undermined all of these third-party apps in their ecosystem, and to try and sell ads.
Sure.
Because the ads was the only business model. They didn't have Bitcoin. They didn't have a cryptocurrency, which we have now.
Right.
And that was the moment that I and some of the other people said, we need a protocol. And I started looking for stuff. And I looked at Bitcoin. There's not much smart contract stuff in there, so you can't quite do it. I looked at, can we do it on top of the BitTorrent thing? Can we do it on ZeroNet? Every obscure decentralized protocol, I tried.
And you from an engineering standpoint.
From an engineering standpoint.
Got it.
And I kept an Airtable of them, and I said, what can we do? Can we find a solution to build something like Twitter in an open way? And by 2018, Jack is now back at Twitter, and I go to him and I say, we need to build a decentralized version of this. And he's like, yes. And then the executives underneath him were like, what do you mean a decentralized version of Twitter? It's going to compete with Twitter.
Yeah.
So they didn't give me an investment, but I got it from other people, started working on it. We built out a couple different protocols, and eventually this pseudonymous developer in Brazil who'd been working on Bitcoin Lightning, a guy named Fiat Joff, takes these pieces that we'd been trying to work on, open source pieces, and creates Nostr. And it works. All of a sudden, without any central coordination, without asking for permission, without having to build hard things, without having to pay for thousands of dollars of servers, we could have something like Twitter. And that just was a light bulb going off.
Wow. Again, from a pseudonymous programmer.
Yep.
Can you, all right, so I'm not a software engineer.
Yep.
I read technical stuff, but I don't claim to have any deep knowledge of it. Can you give me the technical pitch for Nostr? Because I still don't think I get it completely.
So the idea behind Nostr is that just like Bitcoin, you have a set of keys, except instead of holding your money, it holds your identity and your ability to speak.
So it's a decentralized identifier.
It's a decentralized identifier.
Yeah.
And just like Bitcoin, you sign each new message that you write and send out to other people.
Right.
And so some of those messages are your profile thing, and some of them are tweet-like things, and some of them are long-form articles or marketplace listings or likes.
Yeah.
Or, interesting to this crowd here, zaps, where you can send someone lightning payments.
Right.
Right on anything. Instead of liking them, you can send them some sats.
Yes.
And there's a cloud of these things called relay servers that hold your events, your messages.
Yeah.
And then the clients connect to those relay servers and download the content and show you the experience.
Gotcha.
So instead of it all going to a centralized server on AWS where one person controls access to the database and can see everything, in Nostr, you control it. And you send it out into this cloud of servers, and then you can use any client you want to view it. And so we get permissionless innovation.
Got it. Is it permissionless communication?
Yep.
Is it unstoppable? Is it uncensorable?
Yes, it is unstoppable. We have a lot of users in China. They can remove the apps from the App Store in China.
Sure.
But they can't stop the protocol. You can run it over Tor.
Okay. Web apps too? I mean, anything.
There's tons of web apps. Yeah.
Okay.
And you can use a lot of different apps too at the same time.
Have you ever wanted to live in an off-grid community with complete food, energy, and water independence? If so, then you need to check out the farm at Okefenokee. The farm is a pioneering community designed to foster longevity and well-being, eliminating elements that detract from these goals. At the farm, the convergence of nature, nutritious food, a supportive community, and the ethos of slowing down is unparalleled. Positioned at the gateway to the UNESCO World Heritage-nominated Okefenokee National Wildlife Refuge, the farm at Okefenokee stands as a testament to a lifestyle that truly nurtures health and happiness. Unlike conventional housing developments where a token communal garden may suffice, the farm itself is the community. Small, intimate micro-villages seamlessly integrate into the fabric of a sprawling agricultural community. So if you're interested in joining this off-grid community, then go to okefarm.com today to learn more about becoming a member. Make sure to tell them that I sent you for a $21,000 discount on their custom cabin pricing. Again, go to okefarm.com to learn more about joining this revolutionary regenerative agriculture community.
Forget multivitamins and other supplements. Animal organs are the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. You can get 100 times more nutrients from organs than you can from muscle meats. But the problem with eating organs is that they are difficult to find in stores, they are difficult to prepare, and even when they are prepared well, they often don't taste great. Thankfully, Heart and Soil Supplements has made consuming organ meats so much easier by providing powderized organs in capsule form. Organ meats include everything your body needs to thrive: vitamins, minerals, peptides, proteins, and growth factors. This is why organ meats were the most prized foods for our ancestors. Fortunately for us, Heart and Soil makes these treasured foods easily accessible. So go to heartandsoil.co today and use discount code BREEDLOVE to get started on your journey to optimal health and vitality. Again, that's heartandsoil.co, discount code BREEDLOVE. So I was kind of always under the impression that we would need to build unstoppable communications on top of the Bitcoin time chain. But it sounds like that's not the case, that Nostr, I mean, are the censorship resistant properties of Nostr equal to Bitcoin?
So they're different than Bitcoin.
Different, obviously. It's different, different message.
Yeah. So in Bitcoin, you have a single like blockchain. And you use mining to write to it.
Yeah.
In Nostr, each user has the equivalent of their own permissioned chain.
Gotcha.
And the servers keep track of the data. But you can download anyone's data onto your devices and then share it on. And it's kind of like the Streisand effect, which is instead of making it impossible to delete data, we make it very easy to replicate the data.
Got it.
And so we handle censorship resistance by basically making it a whack-a-mole game.
Right. It's like a Hydra.
Yeah. And if you post something and someone's trying to censor it, I don't need to ask your permission to resend it on to a lot of other servers.
Gotcha. So it's really everywhere and nowhere kind of thing.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay. Interesting. I like how you brought in the Streisand effect.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which is what? Where they're trying to photograph her home in Malibu, and she was trying to tell them, don't photograph my home in Malibu, and it became one of the most photographed homes on the internet.
So she was like, I don't want any pictures of my home. And it's just right there on the coast.
Yeah.
And so she sued to prevent the pictures from being published.
Yeah.
And obviously, everybody's like, screw that. I'm going to repost the pictures.
So I guess I probably know some of the answer to this question, but why Nostr? I mean, you said you went to him and told him we had to build this decentralized thing, but what is the deeper why for you? Is it, what failed with the centralized version that you seek to solve with the decentralized version?
So with the centralized version, when we created Twitter, I at least had two goals. One was to democratize communication so that anybody could have the ability to have a platform to reach the entire world. No gatekeepers. The other was to empower users to be in control of their experience and developers to be able to build new things without asking for permission. And we couldn't do it in a decentralized way in 2006. Technology didn't exist. Bitcoin didn't exist. But we made it okay. And it worked for the first 6 years. And then the company shut it down. And so what we're trying to do with Nostr is say, what if you can really own your social spaces? What if you can really own the content you put on the internet? What if there was no way that someone could delete your account? You know, in Nostr, you can choose what algorithms you want.
Gotcha.
You don't have someone else saying, oh, you can't say the word suicide. You have to say unalive because we have the AI that will automatically shadow ban you. So we need that because it's not good for humanity. It's not good for freedom that only a couple people get to decide what the rules are.
For sure.
Mark Zuckerberg just changed the rules on what they're going to moderate on the Facebook platforms, the Meta platforms. But we don't have any say of that.
Yeah.
Like, do we like it? Do we not like it? Everybody just complains at him.
Right.
And he's going to change it. I want to set the rules for myself. And I don't like the idea of someone else being to define how I communicate.
Yes. There's the quote that sovereign is he who decides the exception. And so if someone can just make an exception at any time to whatever rules and whatever system you're using, well, you are not sovereign in that system.
Yep.
So to have this is the premise of Bitcoin too, right? Rules
Absolutely.
without rulers, rules that are incorruptible, unchangeable, et cetera. So that's really cool so you think you're like your confidence interval is 100% that Nostr is that thing.
So Nostr is the best thing we've developed so far.
Got it.
And it may be that we develop new technologies and we have a successor protocol. Nostr is based on an earlier protocol called Secure Scuttlebutt. You don't really need to know about it, but
great name.
Basically, Nostr is an improved version of that.
Right.
And it works better. Now, maybe in a couple years, we find some problems in Nostr and we find some new solutions and we migrate to a new protocol.
Yeah.
But I am absolutely convinced that these open permissionless protocols are the solution that lets us reclaim the internet.
Amen to that. That's what the internet should be, right? Yeah. It's almost like, I don't want to invoke the word public, but it's like a public infrastructure that's not state sponsored or.
Yeah, it's a commons.
It's a commons, yes.
Like
exactly.
The internet should be a commons.
Yes.
And we should be able to provide parts of it.
Yes.
Like in Nostr, you can run your own servers. And if you want to run your server where there is only Christian content on it, then you can do that. I was talking a couple days ago with one of the Nostr developers, and he's a member of Christ Church up in northern Idaho. And he's like, on my network, my servers and my part of Nostr, we only do Christian content. Like you can run it so that he gets to set those rules. And then another person on the network is a sex worker and wants to sell nude pictures. And she's like, on my part of the network, you can't talk about God, but we can be naked. And that's freedom.
Right.
So those two folks are running on the same network, but they're able to enforce the rules that make sense to them. And if you don't like those rules, you can run on a different part of the network or set up your own.
Yes. Maximizing the freedom of the individual.
Absolutely.
Which is the whole premise of libertarian philosophy. So creating your own algorithm, I mean, this is a radically new idea, right? Right now, everyone's just subjected to whatever the algorithm is. And that's a huge, attractor for pernicious activity, right? It's probably the most effective high leverage tool for psychological operations. But the idea of people running their own, what does that even mean? How do people create their own algorithm? They just choose, because it's not just the content they're creating, it's also the filtration of all the other content in the world, right?
Yeah. I mean, algorithms are just software.
Yeah.
They're just, who is this person? What have they done? What are they interested in? Who are they following? And then what's the content and how do we mash it up? And the problem with Meta's algorithms or X's algorithms or TikTok's is that it is a monoculture. It's the equivalent of...
Is it centralized? Is that another word?
It is centralized and it's the same for everyone.
Oh, okay.
So what happens is, rather than like, I want an algorithm that shows me only funny stuff, or I want an algorithm that prioritizes cat videos, or I want an algorithm that shows me the posts of my friends who post less often. You have one algorithm and everybody just tries to game that algorithm. Yeah. And so what we need is a diverse ecosystem of algorithms where users control it, where developers can build their own, and it's
market competition.
That's market competition. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. What do you think? I mean, when people start building their own algorithms and there's competition among algorithms, what do you expect to see? What would you expect that internet to look like? And you mentioned the Bitcoin component as well, that you can send Bitcoin over the Lightning Network on Nostr.
Yep.
What influence does that have on network dynamics?
So it has a big influence on network dynamics because you get a more diverse network. You get a more spread out network. And because it's really easy to set up a Lightning invoice, really easy to send someone some sats, really easy to attach payments for things, we have a model for business that isn't advertising. So we're no longer the product being sold, which means the people making the apps don't need to control your experience because we have another business model.
So yeah, you're alluding to the famous phrase, if the product is free, then you're the product. So we're all the product of social media. Our attention's being sold to advertisers. You're saying that now with this, it's monetized messaging, monetized engagement. What do you call this?
We call them zaps.
Yeah.
And they're micropayments.
Yeah.
And it's a powerful way of building an economic system on top of the social layer.
Is this integrating the flow of information and energy?
Yeah, I mean, it does, yeah.
And we talk about Bitcoin is doing that oftentimes, but it's it's different. So Bitcoin, it's not inheriting any censorship resistant or other properties from Bitcoin, but you can just send these Bitcoin micropayments via Lightning Network on Nostr. Is there any other confluence between these two protocols?
Well, there's a lot of overlap of the developers.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
There's a lot of overlap of the developers. There's a lot of work on wallets. I'm probably the least Bitcoiner person in the core Nostr team.
Yeah.
I'm pretty agnostic about the whole thing. Yeah. I think it's a useful tool.
Yeah.
And they always joke that I'm like the least Bitcoiner person building Nostr. But to me, it's a different solution to the same problem. And if we had a solution that said, okay, we're going to write all speech into a blockchain.
Yeah.
And a bunch of Ethereum and other type startups have tried to do that.
Sure.
It doesn't give you the ability to have privacy. It doesn't give you the ability to have the, end-to-end encryption in a decentralized network, or choose whether or not you're charging for the messages, because you have a cost of writing to a blockchain. So what Nostr does is empower users to use whatever apps they want, whatever content they want, and then the providers of services that do hosting or, publication tools or anything like that, they can charge for it. And it's easy to charge for it.
Interesting. So I think adoption's typically been an issue for decentralized protocols. Like, there have been many successes, but centralized solutions tend to have more marketing dollars and vested interest behind them than decentralized solutions, which tend to be more of a commons, right? So there's a different incentive structure surrounding each. How do you drive Nostr adoption? What's the way to get this into everyone's hands?
That's a great question. So when I started really full-time building these decentralized protocols, everybody told us we were crazy. And I was talking to some of the early Bitcoin folks, and they were told they were crazy. But what happened was, when Elon took over Twitter, all of a sudden people are like, oh, well, maybe this world we have, maybe we shouldn't trust these big corporations. Maybe we shouldn't trust the platforms. Just like when Durov got arrested, people started saying, should we trust Telegram? Are they going to be an agent of the French government?
Yeah. Because key man risk, basically.
The key man risk.
Yeah.
Exactly. So at that moment, people became open to trying new things. And Nostr was helped by Jack discovering it and tweeting about it, by Edward Snowden discovering and tweeting about it, by Julian Assange getting into it and starting to use it. Now, Julian doesn't use it directly, but Stella used it to get him free. And having some big names, a bunch of people. Odell is a big Bitcoiner who uses it, and that helps. But really what brings people in is other people. We don't use social software because it's cool. We use social software because the people we want to talk to and connect to are there.
Yeah.
So we're growing Nostr from the current roughly 1 million people to more by finding people who want their communities to be free, who want them to be open. And it's not necessarily what you think. It doesn't have to be the people who've been deplatformed from stuff. It doesn't have to be like the Alex Joneses of the world. One of the groups we're talking to, they make funny horse videos. These are owners, these are horse people who have videos of them falling off their horses or their horses tripping or stuff. And they've gotten in a fight with some super extreme animal rights activists. who've decided that no one should have any pets. And their 300,000 person Facebook group keeps getting deleted and banned. Mm-hmm. And they're just like, I want to share my horse videos and I want to live in a world where someone else can't stop us from sharing horse videos. And that's important. Another example is there's a subreddit for methamphetamine users. Mm-hmm. Not like addiction help. Like, how do I use meth? Where do I get meth? How do I cook meth? Like, pretty crazy. And the mods, the people who control this, they get to decide what content is on this thing. And the mods of it decided that you can only talk about meth use and you can't say anything sexist or racist or anything offensive in any way. Nothing homophobic. So a group had to create a separate subreddit called Meth Without Communism. And jeez. That is crazy because 4 months ago, Reddit discovered that there was a big meth with communism and meth without communism subreddits, and they banned them all. And I don't advocate using meth. I don't think it's a good idea.
Or communism.
Yeah. But those people deserve to be able to have a space. And the people who participate should be able to say, this set of posts are in the communist and anti-communist meth groups, and only the ones that don't fit in those rules are in one and not the other. Mm-hmm. We should be able to have overlapping communities, and we should be able to choose who our moderators are. And like, if I want super strict rules, great. If I want everything open in the world, great.
Yeah.
That is freedom.
Yes. No, it's well said.
Have you ever wanted to start a business in the Bitcoin space? If so, then the Wolf Startup Accelerator could be for you. Wolf is the first startup accelerator dedicated exclusively to businesses developing in the Bitcoin Lightning Network. 4 times each year, Wolf brings teams from around the world to New York City to work with like-minded entrepreneurs, pushing the boundaries of what's possible with Bitcoin and Lightning. The program is designed to help early-stage companies achieve product-market fit, develop their brand, secure early-stage funding, and grow businesses that fuel the global adoption of Bitcoin. Go to wolfnyc.com to learn more or apply today. Again, that's Wolf, WOLFNYC.com. Would you rather have 1 Bitcoin today or 2 Bitcoin a few years from now? Bitcoin mining is a tried and true strategy for accumulating Bitcoin. Over a 2 to 4 year time frame, successful miners have consistently accumulated more Bitcoin than they otherwise would with a traditional dollar cost average strategy. Blockware's mining as a service enables you to start mining Bitcoin from your laptop. Blockware handles everything from securing the miners to sourcing low-cost power to configuring the mining pool. They do it all. Plus, with Blockware's one-of-a-kind mining marketplace, you can buy and sell live Bitcoin miners with just a few strokes of the keyboard. In this marketplace, buyers get to purchase live machines at vetted facilities, enabling them to mine with 0 lead time. And sellers get the opportunity to liquidate their machines and hosting contracts at will. This means you can mine Bitcoin with 0 long-term commitment and high liquidity on your mining rigs. Blockware will even cover your miner's energy bill for the first week of each of your mining rigs when you sign up at mining.blockwaresolutions.com/breedlove. Again, that's 1 free week of Bitcoin mining at mining.blockwaresolutions.com/breedlove.
There are applications being built on Nostr. Is that correct? So
Yep.
what are some of the most interesting applications?
So first of all, I have my own app, nos.social. It's for iOS. You can go download it in the App Store. And but there's a bunch of others. Primal.net, Damus.io, Amethyst. Those are some of the biggest ones. And each one has its own take. And you don't have to just use one. That's the great part about Nostr is you can use all of these different apps and you connect them to your wallets using this thing called Nostr Wallet Connect so that you use the same wallet in all these different apps. And some of them are social apps like Twitter. And some of them are like Medium. So there's an app called highlighter.com or yakahone.com. And those, they don't show you microblogging tweet-like things. They show you full articles. And you can do a Substack like pay the author for access to them. Other ones are live streaming. There's a site called Zapstreams. It's a Twitch-like live stream. And instead of paying the Twitch tokens, where they take a bunch of their thing, you zap people who you like their stream. And it's an uncensorable streaming platform.
Wow.
We have another one, which is just cooking recipes, Zap Cooking. And you can just share your own cooking recipes and thank people for them. So we have a couple hundred of these apps. We have everything you can imagine that existed on Facebook, all of the Web 2.0 apps. But when you use one, you can find your friends in the other ones. And it just loads immediately.
Wow. So what is the revenue model for the apps? And then does Nostr make money too? How does that work?
So Nostr
is just open source project, basically.
Nostr is an open source project. Yeah. It exists on GitHub.
Yeah.
It has a standards process that we adopted from Bitcoin. You know, there's the BIPs and we have NIPs, Nostr implementation protocols, and a community of people decide what the standard is. And we change it back and forth. You know, the most controversial one was pronouns were briefly added as something you could set on your profile. And then a bunch of people are like, we don't want pronouns. And then we're like, well, what if someone does want to? And so the solution was you can add just arbitrary fields in it. And if you want to put pronoun, you can do it. But no one has to add that to their apps and no one has to ever display it if they don't want to see it. So there's no company there though. We don't have a token. We don't have a company. We don't have VC backing. We have a bunch of free software developers and we have people who are starting businesses on Nostr. So I run a business on Nostr. A bunch of other people run businesses on Nostr. And we sell things. We sell pro accounts where we do media hosting for you. We sell username registrations because, you know, you can get your, you know, Rabble at nos.social as your username instead of having a wallet-like address key. We run services for wallets and gateways where you can do it, get portion of the money. And some of the businesses are making money and some of us are just trying to figure out what that would be.
Right.
But the algorithms, for example, you can use a free algorithm, or if you want one that requires more compute or is more tailored to you, or you get a say over to it, you can pay each time you use the algorithm a teeny amount of money so that the person making that algorithm has incentives to keep going.
Interesting. So then we wouldn't go into a world where each individual is running their own algorithm. You wouldn't think maybe because people will be subscribing to algorithms.
People would subscribe to algorithms.
Yeah, that makes sense. What, like, are these applications able to take transaction fees on the zaps? Like they can write whatever rules they want, right?
Yeah.
Like if you zap on my platform, I get 10%. So paid messaging apps and all, like
at the moment, the way it's working is that's an optional thing.
Yeah.
So you go into the settings, you can turn on, give a percentage to the app developer. Or you can go and say, I want, you know, Damas has, for example, they call it Damas purple.
Right.
Purple is our color. Bitcoin is orange and purple is the Nostr color.
Got it.
And in in the transactions, you could say, give 1% or give 10% to the platform. And, Lightning supports split payments.
Yeah.
And so a bunch of apps take advantage of that.
But the app developers then can't create business models that have, whatever. If every time you send a zap over my network, I get 10%, it has to be.
No, we can do that.
Oh, you can't.
It's freedom tech. You can do what you want.
Gotcha. Okay. That's how, I wasn't sure. It sounded like that was donations only, but.
So Apple and Google have some weird rules about their app stores where they only want you to send payments that you get funded through Apple Pay and Google Pay.
Because they get 30% of it.
Because they get 30%.
Yeah.
So some of the apps have kneeled down to Apple and they let you buy Satoshis from Apple Pay and they have to give Apple 30%. So you get 30% less tokens. And
wow,
some people have refused to do that. And you have to fund your wallet externally. Or you get your wallet from one provider and you connect it to your app. There's been a lot of back and forth dealing with Apple and Google on this stuff. And it's not great.
This is a solution to that? I mean, in the long run, it sounds like this is a decentralized app store too.
Yep.
Yeah.
So on Android, we have something called Zap Store, which is you install it, and then from there, you can install any other Nostr app.
Wow. Super cool stuff. What are the trade-offs? I mean, clearly decentralization gives you a lot of censorship resistance, a lot of freedom, dissident technology. That's great. What are the trade-offs? So like when it comes to these applications facing up against centralized competitors, like what are the difficulties that they have to face?
So we face a lot of difficulties in comparison to the big centralized platforms. One, we don't have the same resources. We are building Nostr off of small companies that have gotten VC funding or self-funded and grants. We've got a grant fund from OpenSats, which is a Bitcoin foundation, and they have a Nostr fund. And a bunch of people have donated to it, but the biggest one is Jack, who's put in $10 million. And he's helped fund a bunch of the conferences. And he doesn't own any of this. He is not making an investment. He doesn't want to control it. He wants to see it happen.
Right.
And we're building it out, and we don't have professional UX people. We don't have marketing people. We're not buying ads. We are an open ecosystem. So it's a bit trickier to figure out how it happens. And we're still figuring out what the Binance and Coinbase are of Nostr. What are the companies that exist that make it easier for users to on-road? And that was why I built my app, nos.social, nos.social, is that I spent a lot of time and a lot of effort trying to make it as easy as Twitter and Instagram. And that's hard. And scaling it is hard, and having a message that it's a community instead of a company is hard. But we're way more resilient. We have 4,000 developers who have built something on Nostr.
Right. What do you, unmet needs in terms of applications? Like what else needs to be built? I mean, obviously we're early days, but like, are there big categories that you'd like to see more development?
So the biggest category and the thing that excites me the most is the idea that we could have groups that have privacy, that have end-to-end encryption. Right now on WhatsApp and Signal, you can get individual chats and you can get groups up to 256 people. But you can't put a live stream into that. You can't put a marketplace listing into that. You can't put a calendar event into a Signal group. What we have figured out how to do is build end-to-end encrypted, totally private, totally censorship resistant groups that can scale to Telegram levels. And so we have the cypherpunk holy grail. which is we are building everything that exists in Facebook groups. But instead of being sharecropping on their platforms where they can decide whether or not you see it, we're building it where only the participants can see what it is. No government can see it. Wow. No data mining company can see it. No surveillance capitalism see it. Like, people can participate themselves and decide what they want to do. And that you could never do before.
Yeah. Wow. So I think you said earlier, I don't know if this is on camera or off camera, you were a leftist?
I'm an anarchist.
Anarchist.
Yes.
Okay.
Anarchist has been on my Twitter profile since the day we built Twitter on March 6th, 2006.
Yeah.
And I believe in humanity.
Yeah.
And I believe the state, isn't serving us. And I believe we can build other alternatives. And I believe that people are inherently good. And if we can write the right structures that don't have a state with a monopoly of violence on top of everything, exerting sovereign control over it, then we can build a better society. Now, I have some differences with some of the folks in the Bitcoin community, the anarcho-capitalists. We agree that the state is a monopoly of violence. And I agree that markets are sometimes a good solution for stuff. I'm also a big fan of the commons. Bitcoins is a commons, Nostr is a commons, Wikipedia, open source are a commons. And I think we should have a lot of common solutions to our problems and not just market ones.
Yeah, we were talking about that a little bit. Describing Bitcoin as a commons is actually tricky because it is and it isn't. It's also super strong private property.
So there is nothing that contradicts private property in the commons.
Okay.
The commons is just a shared economic resource that is governed and managed without a sovereign state.
Got it.
And that means that the people who are sharing that resource have to come to whatever agreement they want on how to manage it. So a commons can have limits. A commons could say, it's just us that do this. And a commons can have property. And a commons can have markets. What a commons doesn't have is a sovereign state that really owns it. And it is...
That changes the rules.
Yeah, that changes the rules. Yeah. Or it's a way of coordinating between private property. So there are some things that are exclusively private property. And there are some things that you have to manage and can't be private property. Fisheries is a great example. You can't own a section of the ocean.
Common pool resources.
Common pool resources.
Yeah.
Eleanor Ostrom she was the first woman to get the PhD in economics, and she studied this stuff, common pool resources, and she showed that it works. And so I love the commons. I think we should build more things of the commons. And I think that although there are good market solutions for some things, I think that there are commons-based solutions for a lot of these problems.
Yeah.
And where I agree with libertarians is I don't want to ask for permission. I don't want to have a state with sovereign control over violence. I don't want them deciding for us.
Wow. So what is I guess we could use fisheries perhaps as the example. Like when you say a common solution, what is that common solution? Is it what we're doing today with fisheries?
So in some parts of the world, the government strictly regulates the fisheries.
Right.
It has monitors on each boat, and it tracks when the boats come into port, and they give people licenses for it. In other parts of the world, the fishermen themselves come together and they say, this is how many fish we can catch this year so that next year we'll still have fish. And so they then come up with an agreement there and a system of monitoring each other and a set of rules. Doesn't matter. Like, the rules only have to matter to the fishermen.
Yeah.
And then a way of enforcing it. And if you really violate the rules, then they can come together and say, no, we're kicking you out. You've been exiled. You don't get to participate in this market anymore because you're going to destroy it.
Yeah.
And that's how you stop the tragedy of the commons.
Yeah.
And some of it is physical enforcement. And it turns out that a lot of it can be just cultural.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we want to get along with other people. We want to be friends. We want to do things. And so
a little bit of shame, exile.
A little bit of shame and exile. And like, these are the rules, and like acculturating people to do it. And what Eleanor Ostrom discovered was that that's an important part of common economic resources and of markets that use a commons.
Mm-hmm.
And traditional economists somehow believe that people's feelings didn't matter, and that we didn't have friends, and we didn't have cultural norms and these other things like this. And
Homo economicus, right?
Yeah. But we're not rational. Like, behavioral economics shows us that we're not rational.
Yeah.
And so because we're not rational, we can actually build better shared resources that no one has to own.
Yeah, it's I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I think the contention over shared pool resources does devolve into statism to some extent, right? Because you do get that enforcement piece, the armed conflict piece, and then, over time that ossifies.
So that's the fear.
Yeah.
And it can go wrong.
Yeah.
We see over and over again open democratic systems, open markets fall into corruption and authoritarian control.
Mm-hmm.
It happens. And we see people wrest that back out.
Mm-hmm.
We get times in which things become more open and more free.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the case of a commons, we have examples of them existing for thousands of years.
Mm-hmm.
A good example is the dams and riverways around Valencia, Spain, where the farmers in this desert region need to be very careful about where the water goes in all of these canals.
Mm-hmm.
And they have managed this without any say of the Spanish state for over 500 years. And it has not evolved into its own parallel government. Another one is forestry in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
The forests of Japan aren't owned by the central government of Japan. The forests in Japan are controlled by each village where the forest is as a commons. Now, you could say it's the government that does it, but it's really sort of a separate institution from the government.
More of a tradition that supersedes government?
Yeah, and they have a process by which they decide who can take how many trees and where we're going to do the planting and how are we going to balance out how we take advantage of this so that the forest is still there. And that has existed for a couple thousand years, while very different Japanese governments have come and gone.
Mm-hmm.
So we have examples of it working, and there are many cases of it, and we have lots of examples of it failing.
Yeah.
It can fail because the state comes in and says,
right,
you can't do this anymore. And that happens a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It could fail because it becomes unbalanced. It can fail because
it can get violent, right?
It can get violent.
Yeah.
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 At some point, the social pressure and social cohesion that makes it work, that sort of soft power, might fall apart.
Sure. Wow. Yeah, I know that's, I need to think more about that, but it's not antagonistic to private property at all.
No. That's what shocks me about the commons is people think that it is this like hard left communist thing where there can't be any property and there's no like no one can have say over it, no one can do business on it and everything else. And that is not the commons that economists actually study.
Right.
That's not the one that actually works.
It's just like the oxygen that we breathe, really. I think it's one big commons we're all in. Even the laws of physics, if you wanted to get more abstract about it, one big commons.
Absolutely.
That one we don't need to worry about anyone
tampering with. No, we don't have any ability to do that.
Hopefully not, at least. That would be bad. David Clark, the designer of TCP/IP, which is a layer of the internet protocol stack, obviously, he said, he's quoted as saying, "We reject kings, presidents, and voting. We believe in rough consensus and code."
Running code.
Running code. What lessons can we learn from the success and proliferation of, internet protocols like TCP/IP and apply them to Nostr?
So I love that quote because it defines how the internet is built today. All the freedom of the web, all the freedom of the internet exists because we reject kings, presidents, and voting. And we believe in what works. And we believe in good enough consensus and agreement. What people don't know is TCP/IP, the very basis of the web and the internet today, was a rebel protocol created in opposition to the protocol the US government wanted the internet to use. The US government wanted a top-down system. They wanted a system where they could surveil it all and they control it all, and you had to ask for permission to participate in it.
What was that called, or did it have a name?
OSI, there's a bunch of different names of it.
Yeah.
But the early academics, Clark and others, said, no, if we want the internet to survive nuclear war, if we want it to thrive, we've got to build a bottom-up protocol.
Right.
And everything that makes the internet powerful is because it's based on this bottom-up protocol where you can voluntarily choose how you participate in it. I don't make you use TCP/IP. You can send bad packets. You could change how it works. But we have a lot of incentive to just make it work and use the same systems and come to agreement on it. And so Nostr works the same way. I can't force anyone else to use Nostr the way I want.
This is a language thing, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like language. Yeah.
It's like language, except it's computers and code.
Yeah.
And that is incredibly powerful because it means that if I want to do something new or innovative, or I don't like the way other people are doing it, I'm not forced to do it.
So freaking cool.
Bitcoin custody is evolving. Both self-custody and single third-party custody come with significant risk and trade-offs. OnRamp is pioneering a new standard, multi-institution custody, which eliminates single points of failure, adding fault tolerance and redundancy to your setup. OnRamp secures your Bitcoin in a segregated cold storage multi-key vault guarded by 3 independent institutional-grade custodians, none of which have unilateral control over your keys. Your funds are fully auditable on-chain, cannot be rehypothecated, and can only move or be withdrawn at your explicit direction. Multi-institution custody removes the technical, mental, and physical burdens of private key management, providing unparalleled peace of mind for you and your loved ones. Bitcoin is money, and as the price continues to appreciate, OnRamp helps you seamlessly tap into financial services like trading, inheritance, insurance, loans, IRAs, and more, all without compromising on security or accessibility. Schedule a consultation with the OnRamp team to learn more at onrampbitcoin.com/breedlove. Again, that's onrampbitcoin.com/breedlove. As one of my business mentors once told me, the job of the boss is to eliminate confusion. The best antidote for confusion is access to truth, which brings clarity to business decision-making and thus optimizes the drive toward future business goals. Over 41,000 businesses have future-proofed their business with NetSuite by Oracle, the #1 cloud ERP system, which brings accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one fluid platform. With one unified business management suite, there's one source of truth, giving you the visibility and control you need to make decisions quickly and effectively. If I was still a CFO, NetSuite is undoubtedly the ERP system I would use in my business. Whether your company is earning millions or even hundreds of millions, NetSuite helps you respond to immediate challenges and seize your biggest opportunities. Speaking of opportunity, you can download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning at netsuite.com/whatismoney. This guide is packed with useful insights and is free for you at netsuite.com/whatismoney. Again, that's netsuite.com/whatismoney.
A recent talk you gave at Nostr World, you shared this quote. We're wired in our brains for stories, connection, community, identity, and cooperation. We evolved a couple 100,000 years ago, and for most of our history have lived as small bands of humanity living in community off the land, unquote. Do you think Nostr can help us return to a more natural form of community? There's this term, digital neighborhoods.
I love the idea of digital neighborhoods.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of this idea of solar punk.
I don't know this.
Solar punk is it's like the permaculture, organic gardening versions of cyberpunk.
Mm-hmm.
We embrace technology. We embrace a future that uses lots of technology, but we control it. Just like cyberpunks, you can hack it and you can make it your own and everything else, except what if it wasn't a world that, cyberpunk is dark.
Mm-hmm.
There's acid rain and there's pollution. What if we could find a way in which we can come together as a community and put up solar panels and build a garden and clean the air around us? So there's a whole movement called solar punk. And there's a genre of science fiction, and I'm a big fan of it. And it informs the work I do. And the work we're doing on Nostr is empowering people to have that, because Nostr lets you do the idea of walking away. Like, we have the right to exit. That famous book,
Exit and Voice.
Exit and Voice.
Yeah. You get exit now.
We get exit.
Yeah, because Bitcoin helps that too a lot.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we can exit by not just ourselves, but we can pull whoever wants to go with us. And if we want to stay connected to the old thing, we can do that. And so what we're building with Nostr is those tools. And when we say digital neighborhoods, a good way to understand social media or social apps is thinking of a metaphor of physical space. Twitter is a hipster dive bar. There's lots of energy. There's lots of excitement. It's really hard to hear someone. Sometimes someone throws a punch. Like, it can be rough and tumble. Instagram is an art gallery. Everyone is trying to look amazing. Like, Basel, Miami, like high end. It's fantastic. Everyone looks amazing. Like, not the way they always look. TikTok is like an amusement park. Like, there's just like all this stuff coming at you like crazy.
Yeah.
And Facebook has become like the municipal community center where someone has a family reunion, but a really sad one. It's there, it's everywhere, but it's not happy anymore. And so what Nostr is right now is a Bitcoin meetup. It's a space where you can get together and you can find other folks and you can talk about what you want to talk about. And no one owns a Bitcoin meetup. But what we're doing to build Nostr is we're saying, well, let's make space for a sci-fi meetup where people talk about sci-fi stories. Let's make space for knitting. Let's make space for the church groups. Let's make space for people doing pole dancing. Whatever it is, you can have your space.
That's so good. Okay, this is actually, I guess, a quote from, I'm sorry, not a quote. In that same talk that you gave, you shared about a Catholic priest, Charles Coughlin, who was deplatformed during World War II, despite having a radio program that had 25% of Americans listened to.
He was the first person to be deplatformed. And
25% of all Americans
25% of all Americans listen to his radio program every single week. Could you imagine that podcast audience? No one has that level of audience.
Right.
He rivaled FDR in the audience size.
Probably why he got deplatformed.
And what happened was he didn't think the US should go into World War II. He was anti-war. Now, I don't agree with his politics because he was also fairly looked positively on Hitler. At the time, people didn't know Hitler was doing things like the Holocaust.
Sure.
We didn't have that information. But you could tell that Hitler didn't like Jews.
Yeah.
And wasn't a lovely, warm and teddy bear guy. So Coughlin wanted the U.S. to stay out of the war. He didn't like what side the U.S. war was on. And so the U.S. government and companies deplatformed him. He was the first person to be deplatformed for political views. And when we now see people being deplatformed, it's important to know that it's not new. Like, these dynamics that we're facing today and these arguments about emerging technology, those are the same arguments that we have been having since the Gutenberg press was printed.
Right.
When the Gutenberg press was printed, there was an argument that you really can't trust the printed word the way you could trust someone's voice when they were talking to you.
Yeah.
When the novel was printed, they said it's ruining the minds of young women because they aren't talking in salons.
Right.
Like, every single time we introduce new technology, we have this moral outrage and this fear that it's somehow going to tear us apart and do all these terrible things. And there's an attempt by existing powers to control it.
Yes. Technophobia. Yeah, we won't branch off into physics now, but at some point we should definitely talk about that because I'm very interested in that. Freedom of speech versus freedom of reach. This has become a new term, I guess, right? That we need freedom of speech in the digital world. So that would be the freedom of reach, I suppose.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on this conversation?
So I am a leftist, and it used to be that the left were radically in favor of free speech.
But you're left anarchist.
Yeah,
just so
left anarchist.
Yes, okay.
And I have always been pro free speech. Somehow, some of my fellow leftists have wandered away from that, and they're wrong.
Is this classically liberal?
Yeah, classically liberal.
Yeah.
They're like, so free speech means I can say what I want, and someone who wants to hear me can hear me.
Yeah.
You can't get between me and an audience. That's free speech.
Yeah.
Free speech doesn't mean I have to listen to you.
Right, for sure.
And free speech doesn't necessarily mean that other people are obliged to carry your speech to a larger audience.
Yeah.
Even on Twitter, especially before the algorithm, you had to build up an audience. You could be on there and no one would follow you and no one would see your stuff. You had to do the work of building an audience. You weren't gifted an audience. And so with Nostr, you have the ability to build an audience. You have the ability to reach people, but you also have people to say, I don't want you to reach me. I don't want to hear your thing. Right. You can go say whatever you want over there, and I'm going to go be over here. And that is also freedom.
Right. Yeah.
To decide that I have my front door and my house and my keys, and I'm going to choose who to invite into my house. And in a public space, you can do whatever you want, but I'm going to make my gated community in my space. And in this site space, in this app, with this algorithm, on these servers, I don't want that. And so I can cut off your reach, but I'm not cutting off your ability to speak. I'm not shadow banning you. I'm not deleting you. I'm not taking away your username, taking away your followers, taking away your content. That is a violation of free speech. And the thing you need to earn is an audience.
Right. So yeah, so freedom of reach is not, this is basically like the privacy function.
Absolutely.
Right? You can selectively reveal and conceal yourself or selectively listen or not listen to what someone else has to say.
Yep.
And privacy obviously is very important to freedom, right? Especially in talking earlier about people working on these technologies. Well, they especially need that privacy from the all-seeing eye of the state that might not like certain dissident technologies. How do you think this changes the world? Like if these technologies succeed, I often talk about the book, The Sovereign Individual on here, and its predictions that it's made. Like, I don't know if you've read the book. Do you subscribe to that kind of transformational thesis, just the decentralization of everything, or?
So we don't know. I didn't know that creating Twitter would lead to a reality TV star converting into becoming a major political leader and reforming, like really changing the politics of one of the two major American political parties, changing the politics of the world. I'm not a fan personally of Donald Trump, but he used the platform. And we never saw that going into it. It never occurred to us that a politician could use it to engage in that way. Now, we thought it was cool. And as it grew, we thought, oh, I think celebrities would really like this because they don't have to go through mediators and they can directly connect to people.
Yeah.
So what does having real private autonomous communities and speech and technology where we can build it, what does it look like where we could have everything of Facebook but free from a surveillance state, where no amount of guns or legislation could possibly get in to see that, where you have that privacy? Like, we used to have the privacy of our own home.
Yeah.
It's in the Constitution. Yeah. And somehow when we went to the digital homes, we lost it. And so we have to get it back with technology. And we can do it. And we figured out how. So that is going to let people see models for organizing themselves that aren't here today.
Right.
Because they're going to see it's possible. And so I think we will see new kinds of organizations, new kinds of businesses, new kinds of social groups. And we're going to still do the same things. We're humanity. We always do the same things. Like we sleep, we eat, we have sex, we find mates, we get in arguments, we produce stuff, we create art, we trade, we get together, we celebrate, we pray, all of these things we do. And we're going to do those on this new platform. But the question is, if we use Nostr, if we use technology similar to it, do we get to use it where it is ours? Or do we use Meta's platform where one person decides the moderation rules, where one person decides whether or not you have a voice, where one person can go in and sell your location data in real time to anyone? And so that is powerful because it opens up the ability to have more change. It's a non-reformist reform of the world. And it opens up the possibility. Now, one of my favorite phrases is that we need a media revolution to make revolution possible. Like, we can't have a revolution with the current tools we have and the current structures. So we need to change the media, change the technology, change our mediums of communication so that we can then change the political and economic structures. When I got started on audio blogging, where we were sharing MP3s before we called it podcasting, before Dave Weiner came up with that term, when I got started, the only way to have a radio program was to put up a radio transmitter. And you know what? I did it. I set up pirate radio stations, but they could only reach a couple miles. And then the FCC would show up and they would take it down and they would seize our equipment. And at one point, I even set up a pirate television station. And it was in DC and it only went a few miles. But it was discovered and it was shut down. Now, anybody who wants to have a voice can build a podcast. They can make a podcast, they can sit down, they can record it, they have the equipment, they have the audience, and they can build up an audience and a bunch of people who care about what they have to say. And you don't have to ask permission.
Right.
And so that has transformed the world. We have so many more discussions going on right now. We have so many more platforms and ideas and social movements and cultural movements that we didn't have before.
Right.
And so I hope that with Nostr and these new protocols that we can do that again. but not just democratize radio, but democratize the ability for people to come together,
right,
and do and discuss whatever they want.
It's beautifully said. It's maybe this is the common theme, right? Increasing the liquidity of ideas, increasing the liquidity of, well, I guess people being able to move about too. That has a lot to do with it, and voting with their feet and such. Maybe the common denominator here between things like Bitcoin, Nostr, other decentralized solutions is they're just enabling and even energizing self-organization.
Exactly.
Right. So like what that's existentially threatening to centralized power structures.
Absolutely.
So how are they? Well, we've seen the response to Bitcoin thus far. It's been kind of a mixed bag, I guess you could say, across the world from nation states. They seem to be more of on the adopting kind of, they have to adopt it on like force of necessity in a way. How do you see states responding to Nostr?
So some states have tried to ban it.
Mm-hmm.
The apps get launched in the App Store in China, and they discover it and they ban it.
Mm-hmm.
Some states are going to try and get it off of our devices and control it. And I've had a bunch of discussions of people who use Bitcoin and Nostr in authoritarian governments, mm-hmm. where they don't have rights. And that's where the end-to-end encryption matters even more. And we need the ability to have that openness. We need the ability to fight for it. Mm-hmm. We need the ability to have privacy in order for us to have other things. And if we build it that way, we can stop the state from coming in. Moxie is a programmer, good friend of mine. He created Signal, mm-hmm. and he created the encryption protocol behind WhatsApp too. Mm-hmm. And Moxie said, we need privacy. We need privacy, not just for me, not just for you. We need privacy for everybody. We need a world where the government can't look at what your text messages are. Mm-hmm. And eventually, what happened was the US government and politicians realized that if they build a system that the FBI can monitor, then the Chinese can monitor it. Mm-hmm. Then their location could be sold. And so we appeal to the people in the state in positions of power about why they need this privacy too, mm-hmm. and why they need these systems. And so my hope is that they stop fighting it, mm-hmm. and eventually they need it for themselves.
Right. So years ago when I was writing some stuff about the sovereign individual thesis, yep. I described these digital technologies as like a digital acid that would kind of like just dissolve these antiquated industrial age institutions. And it sounds kind of like that yep. in a way. It's like they hate it, they want to resist it, but then by force of necessity, the individuals start using it and the whole thing just sort of.
Yeah, going back to the podcasting example, we went to NPR and we said, NPR, you have all of these radio programs. Let's put them on the internet. Let's make all of your radio programs podcasts. Mm-hmm. And NPR, this was in 2005, so
yeah.
NPR said, oh no, we can't do that because we only send our programs to the affiliate stations and they air them at just this time. And we're like, yes, but not every station airs every show you produce. Mm-hmm. And not everyone wants to listen to the show at 6 p.m. on Friday night. And they ignored us. Yeah. They said no.
Yeah.
And so we went and we said, well, okay, we're not going to get the establishment players.
Yeah.
We went to people who made their new shows, made their own shows. We gave them tools to make podcasting work. Mm-hmm. And then all of those people built amazing radio programs, amazing podcast programs, and NPR had to give up and come in and embrace it. And we broke down that monopoly.
Yeah.
That even if you like the programs, it was just a few people in Washington deciding who got to make a program.
Sure.
It doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
We were that asset.
You dissolved it.
That dissolved it.
Amazing.
And I think we can do that in many other areas as well.
And you know what? It's kind of ironic, isn't it? Because there you were knocking at their door saying, here's more freedom you can offer your customers, right? They can choose when to listen to it, whatever program they want to listen to. It's on demand. And there's the institution not getting it, right? It's like human action flows toward freedom, basically. Yeah. I mean, that's the longest arc of human history we've seen a lot of violations of it. We still see violations of it. But on the broadest scale, the trajectory is toward more free.
One of my highest health priorities is keeping my brain in top shape. To take care of my brain power, I do many things, such as striving to read, write, exercise, and meditate daily. One of the latest tools in my brain power toolkit is MindLab Pro. MindLab Pro is a nootropic supplement that is scientifically proven to enhance your brain power. When I take MindLab Pro, my mind feels like it has a better grip on the world, my thinking is more lucid, and the articulation of my speech is radically improved. MindLab Pro has been tested in rigorous, double-blind, placebo-controlled human trials and has been proven to enhance brain power for users in every age group. MindLab Pro is an advanced formulation of 11 nootropic ingredients and is backed by research from over 1,400 human trials conducted over the past 32 years. So if you're looking to enhance your brain power, MindLab Pro is an excellent solution. Go to mindlabpro.com/breedlove to start enhancing your brain power today. Again, that's mindlabpro.com/breedlove. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably get it. You get that Bitcoin upends everything that state-sponsored schools teach us about money. For those who get the importance of Bitcoin, it is important that we have a smart way to buy and hold Bitcoin. My friends at Coinbits, the oldest Bitcoin-only exchange in the United States, have pioneered the concept of roundups, which converts your spare change into Bitcoin. Simply connect your credit or debit cards, and your usual purchases are rounded up to the nearest dollar, letting you stack sats on every purchase without even thinking about it. Coinbits also provides a terrific self-custody experience. Connect a hardware wallet for automatic withdrawals into cold storage to minimize your risk and stay sovereign over your Bitcoin. My favorite Coinbits feature is Coinbits Plus, which gives you the best exchange rate on Bitcoin. It even gives you real-time feedback on how well you are doing on your savings plan. With Coinbits Plus, power users can save more money to buy even more Bitcoin. All that, plus peer-to-peer cash and Bitcoin payments, target orders, price alerts, and more means Coinbits can help you do almost anything you need to do with Bitcoin. So go to coinbits.app/breedlove to sign up today. Again, that is Coinbits, BITS.app/breedlove.
So you mentioned this earlier already, but NoSocial, it's a company you run.
Yep, Nos, N-O-S.
Nos, sorry. No.social is the URL.
NOS.social.
NOS.social. Sorry.
Nos just means us in Spanish and Portuguese. So it's like our social space.
Got it. Commons. But it's an app. Yep, it's an app on Nostr.
It's an app on Nostr. It works on Macs and iPads and iPhones, iOS app.
Yeah.
And our entire goal was to make the experience on this open network as easy as it is on Twitter and on Instagram. Like, you don't have to understand that it's a decentralized network. You don't have to understand that there are keys. You don't have to understand that there's wallets underneath or how someone is sending you micropayments. You just see people and it works and it's visual. And the other part that's really interesting is Nostr is this very free network, but it isn't isolated. Nostr is connected to something called the Fediverse and Threads. That's Meta's property. It's also connected to Bluesky, which was an initial attempt to make an open network that was funded by Twitter, kicked off by Jack, I was involved in that early process of helping design it, and they interoperate. So you can put in anyone's Bluesky user in our app and follow them. They can follow you. You see all the messages.
Oh, okay.
And so it's not like this world is all isolated and segmented like the past. But the parts about the payments, those micro payments, those don't go to the Bitcoin folks. I mean, those don't go to the Bluesky folks.
Oh, okay.
That stays within the Nostr ecosystem.
That's a limitation of Bluesky?
That's because Bluesky doesn't allow it.
Oh, but they could allow it, but they choose not to.
They choose not to.
Okay. This is like little universes interacting or something?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Does the DID carry across all these?
Yeah,
universes?
so DID is a decentralized identifier. It's a way of referencing a person on these systems. And there's lots of different DID systems. And it's sort of how you know this domain name or this account or this person, where do I find their information? Oh, their content is on Bluesky. So I'm going to go to a Bluesky server to request it. Or their content is on Nostr, or their content is on Threads or Mastodon. And so Bluesky is sort of how you map the person's name, whatever handle system there is, to where in the network of all these services they actually exist.
Gotcha. Okay. What is Cashu?
Cashu. I'm amazed that you haven't done an episode on Cashu yet.
Me too. I love cashews.
Cashu is a implementation of eCash. If you remember, eCash was the 1990s cryptocurrency that eventually inspired Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And it's a trusted system that lets you do payments between servers and keep track of their accounting. And so
this is David Chom, right?
Yeah. So Cashu has been around for a couple of years. It's created by this guy, Kali, and there's a community of developers. And the way it works is you can have this thing called a mint that generates temporary use tokens within a thing, and then you exchange them for Satoshis,
right?
And then can move the money around the Lightning Network. But the Cashu wallets and servers are very easy to implement, and they're very lightweight. So you can take the Cashu wallet and embed it inside your Nostr client and then just move it around between things. And so what it does is it lets us, without KYC, and out like full logs of the blockchain or everything else, provide a super efficient layer 2 network on top of Lightning. And it's
layer 2 on top of Lightning. Does that make it a layer 3?
Yeah, well, that's the question, because we've heard of Nostr itself as a layer 3 network because it's the social layer, but maybe it is. Maybe Nostr's layer 4, but yeah.
So interesting. So then the Cashu, you said Cashu wallet, right?
Yeah, it's Cashu wallet, yeah.
So it just is like templatized financial infrastructure for these software applications?
Yeah, it's like a little micro accounting system. And you could account dollars or tokens or Satoshis in it. And it has a way of exchanging between these servers and keeping track of the accounting. And it's all cryptographically verified. And you don't have to know, once you send out the money, you have privacy around who receives the money.
Yeah.
Within each mint, you don't. But it makes the process of sending Satoshis, much faster, much cheaper, much more easy to run. And so you can then put it in many more apps more easily.
Are these, you mentioned earlier, a lot of these software engineers are Bitcoin software engineers, and there's a lot of overlap between Bitcoin and Nostr. Is there also overlap, like Cashu, for instance, that's built on Nostr, or is it separate?
It was a separate sort of Bitcoin ecosystem project.
Yeah.
That as Nostr took off, they're like, oh my God, this would work really great with Nostr. So they're two communities, they're two separate projects. You can run either one entirely separately from each other. You can run Nostr without any Bitcoin whatsoever.
Right.
You can run Bitcoin without any Nostr whatsoever. But there are connections between them, and they work better together.
Got it. What you mentioned Bluesky.
Yep.
Why are you working on Nostr instead of Bluesky? Like what's wrong with Bluesky?
That's a great question. So first off, Bluesky is an open protocol and it's open source. And because of that, we can interact between Nostr and Bluesky. Mm-hmm. And it's way better than a closed system. But the hope was when Jack said, I'm going to get Twitter to fund building a Bluesky project, mm-hmm. was that Bluesky could solve one critical problem, which is Jack was in charge of deciding who was on Twitter. Mm-hmm. And he was in charge of deciding what content to get removed. And he didn't want that responsibility. Mm-hmm. He didn't think it was just or fair for him or anybody who was the CEO of these companies to make those decisions.
Sure.
And so he wanted to push that power out to people to decide for themselves what they did or didn't accept.
Right.
And so what happened was the Bluesky team actually set out to try and build that vision. Mm-hmm. And I know Jay and Paul and a bunch of the people in Bluesky, and they are very committed to trying to build an open ecosystem, an open world. But once they launched, there were a group of people who were the early adopters of Bluesky who got very upset about other content on Bluesky. And so the early users demanded a censorship system. They demanded the ability to absolutely remove users, absolutely remove content. And so what was supposed to be an open system and was Bluesky listening to their users, which is generally a good thing, ended up pushing Bluesky in the direction of repeating the mistakes of Twitter. Because they've not tied themselves to the mast of the ship like Ulysses.
Yeah.
Because they have now built into their protocol the ability to censor.
Sure.
And they have built the protocol in such a way that it is expensive to run your own.
Yeah.
In Nostr, you can run large parts of the network, handling a huge number of people for a couple $100. Our servers are very efficient. Bluesky is optimized for other things, and it costs tens of thousands of dollars a month to run a Bluesky instance. And that means if I don't like them, it's expensive for me to go do a different thing. Mm-hmm. And so they have, they're better than other things like that. But when they made those decisions and when they decided that only employees could design the protocol and that they controlled the keys to the kingdom, that's when independently, both Jack and I decided that our effort and our work should be focused on Nostr because it is a permissionless system.
Right.
Because we have tied ourselves to the mast so that we don't get seduced by the sirens of censorship, of control, of building a system that betrays our values.
Great stuff. You took the right path, as I'm sure you know. What is it technically, again, just you might be reiterating this, that enables that Ulysses contract, right? Where you're lashing yourself to the mast. What is it about Nostr that enables that Bluesky? It sounds like it wasn't a truly decentralized system then, if they made that decision.
Yeah, so Bluesky took some shortcuts in the building of it, where they said, you have keys, you have wallets, like keys and key pairs and under the hood, but we're going to hide it from you. And we're just going to give you a username and password. Mm-hmm. And we're just going to hold those keys on the server and let you choose to move them. But they could also choose to not let you move them.
That defeats the purpose, right?
What we built with Nostr initially was something more like a wallet. Mm-hmm. And you had to have your own keys. Completely non-custodial. And then we had some discussions where the users, especially the non-technical users, they don't want to manage their own wallets. it's hard and confusing, and they understand email and password. So we have been building a secure, decentralized way of storing your keys so you can do the login. But where your key content isn't held by one person, one server, like remotely. And so it took us a while to build that. That's very new that we've gotten that working. And so Bluesky optimized for cutting some corners. And they optimized for getting fast user growth.
Right.
May not have been the wrong decision because they were competing against Threads and competing against Twitter and X. But it meant that they took these shortcuts that are now kind of hard for them to walk back out.
Right.
I had these conversations with them at the time. They're like, don't worry, we will be open. We promise we will be open. But it's very hard to go from closed to open.
Sure.
You gotta be open from the start.
Right. Yeah, there's a path dependence, right? Where once you introduce the threat of politics, basically, it's in there, right? You're not going to go back to open easily, right? How are you going to spur that consensus?
Yep. And the other, what I feel is a mistake they made was they went down the path of venture capital funding. And they took the initial $13 million, which was just a grant from Twitter, and they spent it. And then they needed to raise another $15 million, which they have now spent. And they're paying very high paid, very highly talented engineers coming out of Google and Facebook and Amazon and Twitter and TikTok and all these others who expect these high salaries and the stock options. And so now we're looking at Bluesky raising a big round, potentially from Bain Capital, at a $700 million valuation. And so now they have a lot of incentive to not give the keys over.
Sure.
Like, if you build a system where you have a network of people and all these different things, and we all have businesses and they make money, then you don't have to get that one return to the one thing.
Yeah.
But those investors aren't going to want them to hand the keys back over to the community.
Of course. What are you most excited about with Nostr? Like the future enabled by Nostr?
I'm excited about two things for the future of Nostr. The first is the cypherpunk holy grail of we can really build all social apps, all communications with strong end-to-end encryption that's uncensorable, where like we don't have to ask for permission and we can have our own spaces and our own privacy.
Is that digital freedom of speech? Basically?
Exactly.
Yeah.
For groups of people. I'm excited about that. That's the holy grail of privacy tech. And I'm also excited about a world where you don't have to ask permissions to build a social media app. Before these social media protocols came along, before Nostr came along, you had to ask for Facebook to access their data. You had to ask Instagram for access to the API. And you couldn't make an Instagram client that displayed the photos in a different way. Like you couldn't make your own version of it. And so we saw lots of innovation among developers from 2005 to 2012. And then in 2012, the big platforms decided that they can make a ton of money by completely controlling it and just using all the data and running ads. And they've made a tremendous amount of money on ads. But one of the problems with that is they made it by preventing developers from ever innovating again. We can't build anything new when Facebook and Twitter and all these other platforms could just delete your account, delete your app. And so it isn't about necessarily free speech for individuals, but it's free speech for developers to be able to build on it where you have essentially property rights. Because if you are building on these centralized platforms, they can change the terms of service. Right. They can delete your business. Just look at what happened with Zynga, who had Farmville.
Yeah.
It was a multi-billion-dollar business, but it was dependent on Facebook. And then Facebook is like, well, we've decided we don't like you. And Zynga didn't have anything they could do. So I'm excited about a world where developers and entrepreneurs and hackers and designers can now once again invent new social software. We haven't been able to do it for 12 years. We've been stuck with only a few product managers and only a few companies that had the scale of it. And we had a couple new ones. Snapchat came along and TikTok, but they got very lucky. And in the case of TikTok, spent $1 billion acquiring users. So there's no grassroots thing. There's no like weird social media apps. I want 1,000 really weird apps. And that is the other part that really excites me, because that creativity that existed at the beginning of Web 2.0 was so much fun. It was so playful. It wasn't this nightmare that we talk about now when we talk about social media, where we talk about addiction and, misinformation and censorship and, this giant fight over who can say what and people canceling each other. Like the first wave of social media, you didn't like someone you said, you didn't go get their account deleted or try and get everyone else to unfollow them. You just blocked them and moved on because there was so much open territory. And what Nostr and the other protocols do is they reopen the space for innovation.
Beautiful. How long do you think that is going to take to play out? Like we move from the world that's dominated by the Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, et cetera, into this open range territory you're describing?
We're in the middle of it. So from 2012, when we first started experimenting things that eventually became Mastodon, to the stuff that became Scuttlebutt, which then eventually became both Bluesky and Nostr because they come from the same root. That work was from 2014 to 2022. That was like the early days of Bitcoin, where you were spending 10,000 Bitcoin to buy a pizza. And no one believed it. It wasn't connected to, you can go and buy it with a credit card, buy it it's very much like the early days of Bitcoin. What we're at now is actually the transition. We are in the process of crossing the chasm and going from something that only super early adopters and technologists and programmers could use to something that a much wider audience can use. Now, we don't know whether or not the open solutions will win. There's a chance that the metas of the world will be able to step in and co-opt this, or convince people that they should trust them, despite all evidence to the contrary. So that's the work to be done. And that's the work not just to be done by the developers and designers, but also by the users. Because each person gets to choose where they spend time. And moving people into an open world, moving people onto open tools, that's social labor, that's organizing, that's community building. I mean, that's what everybody who organized a Bitcoin meetup was doing. That's what everybody who organized a conference was doing. That's what everybody who set up a podcast was doing. That's what everybody who wrote articles were doing. That's what people wrote documentation, people wrote software, all of these things. That's the process of getting people to join it. And we're not going to spend $1 billion and buy ads the way TikTok grew. We're going to do it as a community, and the community that listens to this podcast understands how Bitcoin grew. That there's not a company at the center of it. Like, everybody gets to participate in the way they choose to participate. And the technology is the mediator between it. So we have the opportunity to build that on Nostr.
Yeah.
And it's super exciting. We have the opportunity to liberate social. just like Bitcoin is working on liberating money.
I was going to say, this is so damn cool to see the echo effect, right? Like Bitcoin emerges as this decentralized protocol that makes a lot of early adopters super rich. And then those, those windfalls get recycled into these other projects that further decentralize communication and further dissolve the state. It's very cool. It's cool to be alive right now. I mean,
it's very exciting.
It's like we're shifting. We are in the change of an age, right? From the industrial age into this digital age. And it seems like we're kind of early too. Like I feel like this one could be really big. How weird is the world going to get in the next 100 years?
It's going to get very weird, but we're going to be people. We are still people. We will always be people. Mm-hmm. We will always fall in love and want food and shelter and community and meaning and spirituality and to be healthy. And we will always engage in sports and we will always do the things that we do. Mm-hmm. And the technology substrate is going to change in ways that we can't imagine. Mm-hmm. AI is going to change it in massive ways. Mm-hmm. Universal access, new things in chemistry, new things in engineering, robots, all these things, they're going to change the world a lot. But we're going to stay the same. Mm-hmm. And that I don't think is sad. I think it's reassuring because humanity's amazing. Mm. Like, yes, we've had wars, we've had exploitation, slavery, and all those other things like that. But also look at all of the amazing things we created. Look at all of the kids that grew up with loving families in thousands of different languages and different cultures. Like that part, that's going to stay the same. And we want to build technology that makes that easier.
Right. Yeah, the whole be fruitful and multiply. These technologies enable that and amplify that even. So it's super cool stuff. I think it's time for us to have some dinner.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have any wise closing words, or would you just maybe share where people can find more about you or your work on the internet?
Yeah. So in closing, like, try it out. Mm-hmm. Like, go download some apps, go read about it, read about Nostr, try my own app, nos.social, and try out some of the other apps because they all work together. Mm-hmm. And if you like it and you get it, work on bringing your friends, bringing your communities, and not just like a Bitcoin community, but like work on your gym, work on your church, work on your friend group, like get them moving over. Mm-hmm. There's a new app coming out called White Noise that lets you do something like Signal or Telegram, except with really good encryption and privacy. Experiment with moving your Telegram group to that. Like, the work of making this real is everybody's job. Mm-hmm. And we have built the technology. We've got the first version. It works. Is it great? No. But come design it together with us. And if you believe in this vision, every participant has the ability to make it happen. And that's the only way it happens.
I think it's a beautiful place to bring it to a close. Rabble, thank you so much, man.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a real pleasure.
A lot of fun.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money, and be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.